Hi everyone, it's Caitlin from Really Big Plant. Thank you so much for joining me.
Really Big Plant.
This is my little Zen plant fountain. I had this concept in my head for a long time of just like one of these little tabletop fountains, but filling it with plants. And I'm really excited to show it to you. Found the perfect plant for a little water project. This is called a Cyrtosperma johnstonii. And it is a member of the aroid family. It's been on my radar for a while because it is a really big plant. It was only $20 on Gabriella Plants, and it wants to live in a very, very hot, humid, wet environment. It wants to grow even partially submerged underwater. It's usually described as a bog plant. So this is a plant that I never thought that I would be compatible with because I don't really grow aquatic plants, but I've kind of had this interest recently to see if I could create some kind of semi-aquatic setup, and this one is going to be the perfect one for the job. I mean, what could be more perfect than to live in a fountain than a plant that wants to grow semi-aquatically in a bog? So my first thought was to do like a pebble tray or to just put a humidifier by this plant, but I've had this vision for a little plant fountain for a while, so let's get into making this. I took my remaining LECA that I have in my collection, it was like all the LECA I had left, and I boiled it up to clean it. You want to boil it for about 10 minutes on the stove to make sure that you really sterilize everything. This step probably wasn't necessary, but it's always good to clean your LECA just because it's pretty easy to clean. Just stick it in a pot and boil it. So this setup is comprised of this bowl and then this top piece that is the fountain spigot, and then inside of there's a tiny little water pump with a tube that just connects it up to this spigot. The other vase that you see on here is not connected into the water. It's just like a little propagation vessel. And I really like this setup because the whole thing comes apart and it'll be really easy to clean. And this little fountain was only like $50. I found a little black plastic nursery pot. I wanted a black one because the fountain is black, and I cut off the top of it to the level of the fountain so that it could sit inside of here without sticking up. So I did end up shortening the pot a little bit, and it's a pretty small pot for this plant, but I'm assuming that the roots are going to find their way into the water of the fountain eventually, so I think it's okay if it's a little bit small. The main function of repotting this plant into LECA is to keep the plant itself out of the water. I'm gonna need to pot this up into a bigger pot, but for now, this seemed like a good place to start. I wanted to switch it out into LECA. So the first thing I did was unpot this plant and clean off all of its roots, unpotted it from its potting medium, which was some sort of soil. It was sent to me as like a land plant, which is typical. It's funny now that I'm distinguishing between like land and water plants now that I have this, but it was sent in regular potting medium. So I unpotted it, rinsed off the roots, and it had a beautiful, beautiful root system in there. Okay, So get your fountain ready. Test the pump. You're gonna wanna figure out where on the pump the water intake is so that you can create a makeshift little filter. So if you can use some cheesecloth or even some sponge. You can rig this any way you want, but it made the most sense to me to just make a little cheesecloth bag and put it around the filter to try to block out any little particles. And that's pretty easy to clean. You just unwrap it, rinse out your cheesecloth and put it back. And added some distilled water, just enough to cover up the pump so that the water keeps flowing. And then it was looking a little empty in my fountain, so I found another little nursery pot that I have. It's like a 1.5 inch, I think it's smaller than a 2-inch diameter pot, and I just put a little propagation of bamboo in there. So for that one, what I did was, because it's a much smaller pot and LECA floats, I knew that if I were to submerge that tiny pot into the fountain, all of the LECA would float away. So I ended up putting a little bit of cheesecloth in the bottom and then put some gravel, just like some horticultural gravel, which is really heavy. You don't have to use gravel. You can use any kind of rocks or anything you have around. It's just that this happened to be the heaviest thing that I had to put in the bottom of my pot at the moment. So I used the little horticultural gravel and then I put a cheesecloth because I didn't want that sucking into the filter. So I potted that up and then I put LECA and I put my little bamboo propagation in there. The bamboo is another good choice for a little fountain because bamboo is a plant that grows really well in water long term. So it seemed like a really perfect plant to put in there as a little companion. So I was considering drilling a hole through this top pot and putting a little wick in there so I could plant a real plant in this top piece. But then I realized that for cleaning purposes, like this whole piece lifts off and it's really easy to take this out. And I wouldn't actually want there to be a plant potted in there because I wouldn't be able to clean the whole thing as easily. So I just stuck some little pothos propagations in the top. Oh look, they're already rooting. So I'm just gonna use this little vase as a little propagation vessel, which I think is perfect. It's really cute. And then what you see here is I have a little glass rod that I put in the water flow that is just to help minimize some of the sound because the trickling water noise sometimes bothers me. But when I put the little rod in, it really, really decreases the amount of noise. And you don't need a glass rod. I will link something similar in my Amazon shop, but I just happen to have that. But you can use a piece of plastic from a water bottle or anything basically see-through, or if it doesn't bother you, you can use whatever you want in there. You could stick a little raccoon pecker in there if you're a moonshiner. Been watching moonshiners. Anyway, anything that you put in there that connects the stream of water down into the larger basin is gonna minimize the sound. It gives the water a channel to run down and you don't have all of that splashing. When I first thought of this idea, I thought I would put the plant directly into the fountain and try to just let it grow in water. My plan was to fill the bottom of the fountain with gravel and to put a little filter around the pump, and then to plant the plant directly into some gravel in the water. But this actually seemed like a better idea once I thought about it, because if you've got gravel directly in your fountain, then it becomes a lot harder to clean. It's like cleaning a fish tank. But if I want to clean the fountain, I just pick this straight up and take it out. I can dump out the water. I just take out all the other plants and rinse out my little fountain and I'm good to go. I can just stick these right back in here. So I feel like that's actually really, really convenient, because when I was imagining having aquatic plants, I thought it would be a whole ordeal to try to clean things, but I think with this setup that I devised, it actually keeps things very neat and easy. You just take all the plants out, they're in pots already, and you just dump the water out of the bowl and rinse everything and put it right back. It couldn't be easier. I don't want any little gnats making a home in there. So the mosquito BTI is a biological control. It's essentially a pesticide that kills just fungus, gnats, and mosquitoes. So I put a little of that in there too. What do you guys think about this? Do you think this is manageable? I really hope that this is gonna live and thrive and do really well for me, even if I end up having to change out the plants in here, although I do think that this Cyrtosperma is the perfect plant for this project. The fountain is so simple, and then the plant is so ornate in its own way. The stems even have this like little light pink on them, which I didn't notice at first. It's like dark purple and light pink spots. They're all kind of brown. I think the color's actually there. I don't think I'm crazy and just making it up. It's like purple and pink, which, if you know me, I mean, I love purple and pink. So this plant is so awesome. It's got spikiness. It's got these little red, pink veins. It's got the beautiful shape that I like. One of the ways that I see people talking about keeping this plant most commonly is in a double water bath, where you grow it hydroponically and then you put the entire setup inside of a warm water bath to keep the whole thing warm, because this plant really doesn't want to get cold. I saw on a forum someone saying that if you put an ice cube in your mouth and then blow on this plant, it'll die, which I'm sure is an exaggeration, but that kind of gives you some sense of this plant's requirements. Funny little bonus of this cheap fountain, the little water pump in there gets a little bit warm, and I've noticed that the water temperature, while it's not warm, I think it's a little bit warmer than room temperature. I think it might be just a degree or two warmer, which is perfect. It all works out for this plant. It gets its slightly warmed water, it gets humidity from the fountain, it gets a little bit of percolation, a little bit of bubbling down there, which means that the water is getting some aeration too, some oxygenation. Plants like there to be some oxygen in the water. When the oxygen totally depletes, that's one of the situations that leads to root rot, which is why it's different to grow a plant in a basin of water versus growing it outside in a stream or something like that. Like when plants grow in a body of water outdoors, there's turnover of the water. Usually there's some flow, or the body of water is big enough or has things living in it that essentially change the oxygen levels and make sure that the water stays oxygenated. When you have a basin like this in your house and you pour water in it and you put a plant in there, if you don't change out the water, or if you don't have a bubbler in there or a little bit of turbulence adding oxygen into the water, eventually the oxygen gets mostly depleted from the water and the plants will suffer from that. So that's one of the main reasons why it's a good idea to change the water in your water propagation. So this little fountain, I think, is going to serve a really great purpose of turning over the water and making sure that there's bubbles going into it to keep this plant happy. I did wait about a week, a little over a week, between when I planted this in here and when I'm showing this to you now, because I did want to make sure that everything would be okay, that the plant could survive, that the filter wouldn't instantly clog up. So it's been like 9 days or something since I put this in here, and so far so good. The plant, the Cyrtosperma johnstonii, had these little yellowing baby leaves on it when it arrived, and even those leaves seem to be hanging on really well. So I thought actually by now those smaller leaves would have departed, but I think this setup is doing really well for the plant. I put distilled water in here, and I think everything in here is really happy. So I don't want to jinx it, but I think it's doing great. I'm so excited to have this tiny fountain now. I find myself just staring into it. I'll just gaze into this fountain, and it's such a nice little escape from reality for just a moment to have a little water feature inside. I never thought that I would have one, honestly, because I've always been a little bit paranoid about the idea of having a fountain inside, because if it were to spill, it obviously would be very problematic. So these little tiny fountains really appeal to me because there's only a couple of cups of water in here. There's very little water. If for whatever reason this were to spill everywhere, all of the water that's in here would be able to evaporate within like a day or two, just because it's not that much water. Whereas some of the other fountains that I was looking into and considering, they're like this big, and they're probably better for growing plants because there's more room. I did find a fountain that's made specifically for growing hydroponic plants, and I will link that to you guys. That was one that I was considering for this project as well, but it just seems so big that if something were to happen, if a huge thing like that were to dump water, I'd really be in trouble in my house. But this is such a small quantity of water that if this spilled everywhere, it'd probably be okay. I'm actually about to leave on a little vacation. It's why I'm all dressed up. It's actually my wedding anniversary. My husband and I are about to head out. But I am leaving this plant behind, and I was considering unplugging it. I've had this running for over a week with no problems. But what I'm gonna do is I've got this Tupperware here that is bigger than the fountain, and I'm just gonna set the whole thing inside this Tupperware. And again, I love how small this is, that it can just fit in here. So now I feel really relaxed, because if something were to happen and the pump were to like explode and the bowl were to disintegrate, you know, nothing is gonna go wrong like that. But if it did, the water would all be caught in this outer bin. So I feel good about that, and this is how I'm gonna leave it when I go on my little trip. So hooray! This is like the easiest project in the world. The only thing about it is that it has to be plugged in. As somebody who thinks a lot about fire safety and like, I don't know, just general types of like safety things like that, it does always make me nervous to have a plugged in water feature. But as far as I can tell, it should be okay. Just safety tip. Okay, when you have a plug like this and you have it touching water, just make sure that you always plug it in this direction so that water can't travel down into the outlet. Okay, don't plug this in upside down if you can help it. Plug it this way. That's how you be safe with a water feature that's plugged in. All right, you guys, I love this project. I'm so excited to be able to show it to you. I do have everything linked in the description, plus more on my Amazon, and I would love to hear from you. If you do a project like this, send me a photo, or feel free to link to your social media accounts. If you guys are like my regular commenters and you have a plant Instagram, please comment the name of your Instagram down below so that I can stalk you, or YouTube channel, or whatever it is, social media. If you've got like a plant social media thing that you do, especially if you do any kind of fountain like this, I would love to see yours. And if you are a person who does grow plants aquatically normally and have any tips for anybody reading, please share them. I think up next, I want to try making a carnivorous plant bog, and I also want to do water lilies, but I think I'm gonna need something way bigger than this for water lilies. So that's maybe sometime in the future. That's the fantasy plant wish list. Do any of you grow water lilies at home inside? It's been so much fun. I'm obsessed with my little dissociation fountain. I've been calling it my dissociation fountain, a little planty escape from reality. Sometimes you need a little extra help with the escape, and you need to make a little Zen fountain to create a little world that you can try to relax into. Thank you so much for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed this video and that you're gonna make a little fountain of your own. I hope that you are having a fantastic planty week and that your plants are bringing you joy, as much joy as my little fountain is bringing me. And I hope to catch you in the next one. Bye.